Welcome to this Sahara 4 exercise. In this exercise, we will review the different calculation options associated with the simulator in Sahara. For that, we will open our Sahara project, and here we will go to Simulator, Calculation Options. In calculation options, first we will have this window where we can see that in the first option in this menu on the left, we will have this summary of all the options that have been selected. Here you can see that we have a number of options missing or with just in blanks because we haven't selected them yet, but we will do it now. The first submenu here we have to select which is going to be our calculation method. In this case, we will use segregated flow for the example. Here, if you select this checkbox here, you can add, if you have created a variable associated to viscosity with viscosity units, scatter data type of variable, and you have loaded viscosity, the segregated flow is going to be affected by that variable water viscosity. Obviously, this is going to be quite useful if you are simulating polymer flow or any other additive that is going to increase the viscosity of the water being injected. Um, Here you have the statistical curve, the Buckley-Leverett equations, CGM, that is the other analytical method, and the other Ward method, in this case the regression of the Ward versus MP curve that we have discussed previously. Um, so here you have other options if you want to use a fill-up curve. So we will keep moving forward. In the scenarios, here we will use the calculation scenario that we have created in the previous exercise, and in the injection scenario. In this case, as we just want to do the regression phase of the adjustment of the simulator, we will use the history. If you want to do forecast, you will need to use one of these injection scenarios that were created also in the previous exercise. But for the regression, let's just use the history of the water being injected defined in the project. Limits, here we can define the end of the calculation. We will define it as 2047. Here you can define also economic limits. In this case, the production of the wells is going to be cut before at the point where you reach any of these limits, can be the minimum oil rate or a maximum water cut. Um, you can define it here if you want to use it for regression or only in forecast. In this case, we won't use any economic limits. Here we define how the initial element saturation is going to be calculated. Here you have a number of options. You can weight it by the total water injected in MOPS or the saturation of oil. In this case, in saturation, you have other sub options. We can define it as the saturation that has been loaded in the layer or region, in each different layer on each different region. We will talk more about regions in a future exercise, but in this case, for this example, we will use the saturation that has been defined at the layer level. Here you can also load a map of oil saturation or any other of the phases. In this case, obviously, we want to use oil saturation for this, and consider the oil saturation of the elements calculated from the one on the map. And also you can use scatter data here. There is another tool that we haven't discussed yet that will allow you to define the saturation at the start of the secondary recovery as a calculation done from the difference of the original saturation at the start of the project, the start date of the project, and also the total oil produced in the history scenario. So in this case, you can use scatter data that is going to be the result of this tool to calculate the initial saturation of the elements at the start of the secondary recovery. But for now, we will use this more simple option and just use the layer information that's directly loaded in the layer level. We can review if this information has been loaded here, layers, data, and check for the mobilities. Here we see that we have defined the minimum, like the limit saturation for water and oil, the minimum oil saturation, and also the minimum water saturation. Mobilities have also been defined, and here we should have, yeah, and here we have for all the layers the water and oil saturation at the start of the secondary recovery. That this is the data that we care about. That is the one that is going to be initialized in the different flow elements at the moment that we click calculate here. So let's keep moving here. We have already defined that we are going to use the initial element saturation coming from the data of oil saturation defined on the layer level. Data source, here we define if we want to use layer or regions as data sources. In this case, we will use just the information that has been loaded in the layers. From calculation primaries, this is going to define if we want to use the information stored in prime sim to consider the primary recovery of the wells. Here we can define if we want to terminate the primary earlier at the moment of the secondary start, or if we want to just keep considering this primary recovery as well, or just terminate primary only during the periods with secondary recovery. So we have plenty of options here to define what to do with the production coming from primary once the flow elements appear. In this case, we will just consider the one that is at the well level. We won't do the discrimination for layer for the primary recovery. And here we have response time as well, that this will allow us to consider a delay as well in the response time of the water being injected to the oil being produced, but we won't use it in this case. So we have everything set. Let's go back to the summary, and now we can see that we will use segregated flow. We will store this information, the result of the calculation in the scenario. In the calculation scenario is SF coming from segregated flow. We are going to use history as the scenario where we are where we are supplying the injection in each different layer. Here we consider the initial saturation defined at the layer level, at the layer data. All the data sources will be layer. We won't use regions in this opportunity. We will do the calculation for all the layers. We won't use any fill-up curve. Then calculation date will be 2047. We won't have any response time here, and we will consider the primaries just from the well level. So if we have any decline on the primary sim scenario, it will be considered just at the well level as a whole. So yeah, that will be everything for this tutorial, and thank you for watching. In the next exercise, we will run the simulation for the first time to review the regression of the information and compare it to the history scenario. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.